A massive geological threat in northern Canada is no longer being ignored. Scientists are warning that the Tintina Fault, a 621-mile fracture stretching across Canada and Alaska, may be capable of producing a powerful magnitude 7.5 earthquake or even stronger. For decades, experts believed this fault had been inactive for millions of years. It was considered harmless, forgotten by time. But new satellite and aerial mapping technology has revealed something shocking. Hidden beneath dense forests, researchers found clear signs of enormous ancient earthquakes, events strong enough to shift the landscape by nearly 3,000 feet. Even more concerning, studies suggest the fault has been slowly accumulating stress for around 12,000 years. That energy has nowhere to release, and scientists say the system is tightly locked. Researchers now believe large fault systems can influence one another. If activity spreads between major seismic zones, the impact could reach far beyond Canada, potentially affecting critical infrastructure, including the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, and sending tremors across vast regions. What was once dismissed as silent may simply have been waiting.
It ranks among the largest fault systems on the continent. The seismic structure cuts through northeastern British Columbia, carves across the Yukon, and extends deep into Alaska. Geologists first discovered it in 1912, but what they found, they quickly dismissed. The fault had shifted laterally, nearly 280 miles over its geological lifetime. That kind of movement indicates enormous tectonic forces at work. Yet scientists concluded that all that activity belonged to the ancient past. Their assessment was simple. The Tintina Fault had remained dormant for 40 million years. Case closed. The reasoning seemed logical at the time. Active faults produce earthquakes. The San Andreas Fault generates thousands of small tremors every year. The Hayward Fault rattles the San Francisco Bay Area with regular seismic activity. Monitoring stations detect the movement. Scientists track the danger. Communities prepare accordingly. The Tintina Fault did none of this. It sat in silence beneath dense Canadian forest. No rumbling, no warnings, no reason for concern. This is the quiet fault problem that seismologists now recognize as deeply dangerous. When a fault produces no regular seismic activity, it disappears from hazard assessments. Emergency planners ignore it. Building codes overlook it. The public never learns its name. Consider the contrast with California. The San Andreas Fault is so visible that airline passengers can spot it from 30,000 feet. The scar runs through desert terrain where nothing hides. Subdivisions sit directly on top of it because developers knew exactly where the danger lay. Residents understand the risk even if they choose to accept it. The Tintina Fault offered no such visibility. Thick forest concealed every surface feature. No aerial photographs revealed its presence. No obvious trace warned nearby communities. The assumption of dormancy became accepted fact. For over a century, that assumption shaped everything. Research funding went elsewhere. Monitoring equipment tracked other threats. The Tintina Fault faded into geological footnotes while pressure continued building in the darkness below. New technology finally revealed what the forest had been hiding for millennia. Researchers at the University of Victoria deployed high-resolution topographic imaging using satellites, aircraft, and drones. They scanned the landscape searching for evidence of prehistoric earthquakes. What they found changed everything scientists thought they knew about the Tintina Fault. The team discovered glacial landforms that had been violently offset across the fault escarpment. The displacement measured more than 3,000 feet. That movement occurred approximately 2.6 million years ago during the Quaternary period. An epoch spanning from that distant past to the present day. But the evidence did not stop there. Additional features showed displacement of 245 feet, occurring roughly 135,000 years ago. These were not minor geological adjustments. Offsets of this magnitude require earthquakes of catastrophic intensity, the kind of seismic events that reshape entire regions. The researchers then examined more recent geological history. They analyzed landforms dating back 12,000 years. These features showed no displacement whatsoever. No evidence of large ruptures appeared anywhere along the fault during that entire period.
Residents were aware that danger existed, even if they chose to live with it. But the Tintina Fault never offered that kind of warning. Dense forests covered every visible clue from the sky. Nothing unusual appeared. No aerial image exposed its path. No visible mark alerted nearby communities to what lay beneath their feet. Over time, the belief that the fault was dormant transformed from theory into accepted truth. For more than 100 years, this assumption influenced scientific priorities. Funding shifted toward other geological threats. Monitoring systems focused elsewhere. The Tintina Fault slowly slipped into obscurity, reduced to a minor reference in geological records, while deep underground, pressure continued to build unseen. Eventually, modern technology uncovered what the forest had concealed for thousands of years. Researchers from the University of Victoria applied advanced high-resolution topographic mapping using satellites, aircraft surveys, and drone imaging. Their mission was to search the terrain for signs of ancient seismic activity. What they uncovered completely reshaped scientific understanding of the Tintina Fault. The research team identified glacial landforms that had been dramatically shifted along the fault as measurements revealed displacement exceeding 3,000 feet. This massive movement occurred approximately 2.6 million years ago. During the Quaternary period, a geological timeline stretching from ancient history into the present. But the discoveries extended beyond that single event. Additional formations displayed displacement of nearly 245 feet, dating back roughly 135,000 years. These were not small or gradual shifts. Movements of this scale require earthquakes of extreme magnitude, seismic events powerful enough to transform entire landscapes. Scientists then turned their focus toward more recent geological formations. They studied landforms formed within the last 12,000 years. Surprisingly, these features showed no measurable displacement at all. Across that entire period, there was no sign of major ruptures anywhere along the fault line. This finding revealed a deeply unsettling conclusion. The fault had not become dormant. It had simply fallen silent. That distinction is critical. A dormant fault gradually releases accumulated stress through steady movement or minor earthquakes. A silent fault does neither. It remains locked in position while tectonic forces continue pressing from below. Year after year, pressure builds without relief. Energy accumulates. Wade, scientists now understand why earlier generations failed to detect these warning signs. Evidence of fault activity can extend over distances exceeding 100 meters, yet the visible surface shifts may rise only a few feet high. In heavily forested terrain, such subtle features were nearly impossible to identify using older observational methods. Previous geologists were not careless. They were limited by the tools of their time. Quite simply, they could not see what the landscape had been revealing all along.
One scientist framed the timeline problem in human terms. We are not good at thinking about things that happen every 12,000 years. Our minds cannot grasp such vast stretches of time. But geology does not care about human perception. If the 12,000 years are up, the consequences arrive regardless of our awareness. The comparison to the San Andreas Fault puts this threat into perspective. California's famous fault line generates constant attention from researchers, emergency planners, and media coverage. The Tintina Fault has received almost none. Yet the accumulated strain suggests it could produce an earthquake rivaling or exceeding anything the San Andreas might deliver. The fault has been charging for 12 millennia. Scientists now believe that charging cycle may be nearing its end. Dawson City sits just 12 miles from the newly identified active section of the Tintina Fault. When the rupture comes, severe shaking there is guaranteed. Buildings constructed decades ago without seismic considerations will face forces they were never designed to withstand. But Dawson City represents only the beginning of the impact zone. Alaska's Fairbanks North Star Borough lies directly in the threat radius. Over 125,000 people live there with virtually no awareness of the danger beneath their feet. Emergency planners have not prepared them. Warning systems do not exist. Evacuation routes remain undesignated. Trans-Alaska. Pipeline runs through this seismically vulnerable corridor. This critical infrastructure carries a significant portion of America's domestic oil supply. A major rupture along the Tintina Fault could damage or destroy sections of the pipeline. The economic and environmental consequences would ripple across the entire nation. Highways and mines throughout the region face similar exposure. The terrain itself compounds the danger. Scientists describe the area as notoriously rockfall-prone. A magnitude 7.5 earthquake would not just shake the ground. It would trigger landslides across vast stretches of mountainous wilderness. Roads would become impassable. Communities would find themselves isolated. The 2018 South Central Alaska earthquake demonstrated how far seismic damage can travel. That event caused infrastructure failures as distant as Minnesota. The northbound on-ramp for International Airport Road at Minnesota Boulevard collapsed from tremors originating over 1,500 miles away. Experts now fear a major Tintina rupture could affect regions stretching to Montana.
When the rupture eventually occurs, intense ground shaking will be unavoidable. Structures built decades ago without earthquake-resistant design will be subjected to forces far beyond their intended limits. Yet Dawson City would represent only the first area to feel the impact. Alaska's Fairbanks North Star Borough sits directly within the potential danger zone. More than 125,000 residents live there with little to no awareness of the threat hidden beneath the surface. Emergency response plans have not been specifically developed for this scenario. Dedicated warning systems are absent. Evacuation routes remain undefined and unprepared. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline also crosses this seismically sensitive corridor. This vital infrastructure transports a substantial share of the United States' domestic oil supply. A powerful rupture along the Tintina Fault could severely damage or even destroy sections of this pipeline. The consequences would not remain local. Economic disruption and environmental damage could spread across the nation. Transportation networks and mining operations throughout the region face similar vulnerability. The landscape itself intensifies the risk. Scientists describe the terrain as highly susceptible to rock falls. An earthquake measuring magnitude 7.5 would not merely shake the ground, it would unleash widespread landslides across vast mountainous areas. Roads could be buried or broken. Entire communities might become isolated without access to assistance. The 2018 South Central Alaska earthquake demonstrated how far-reaching seismic damage can be. Infrastructure failures were recorded at remarkable distances from the epicenter. Tremors traveled hundreds of miles, affecting regions far removed from the source. The collapse of the northbound on-ramp connecting International Airport Road to Minnesota Boulevard illustrated how destructive force can propagate across great distances. Experts now warn that a major rupture along the Tintina Fault could impact areas extending as far as Montana. The scenario resembles something from a disaster film, yet the geological mechanisms behind it are entirely real. Imagine a magnitude 7.5, a stronger earthquake striking without warning. No preparation, no public awareness. Residents left asking what caused such devastation. In California, the San Andreas Fault is widely known. When a major earthquake strikes there, its origin is never a mystery. Along the Tintina Fault, the situation is different. Many communities have no understanding that they exist within a seismic hazard zone. The earthquake would arrive as a complete surprise. This troubling reality raises a persistent question among seismologists throughout North America. How could a fault line stretching approximately 621 miles remain largely overlooked for more than a century? The explanation exposes fundamental limitations in how seismic risk is evaluated. Hazard assessments rely heavily on historical earthquake records. These records include indigenous oral traditions and measurements from modern seismic monitoring networks. However, such documentation typically extends back only a few centuries. Fault systems that activate on cycles spanning thousands or even tens of thousands of years remain effectively invisible within these data. In recent decades, monitoring stations recorded only minor tremors along the Tintina Fault, typically ranging between magnitude 3 and 4. These small events registered on instruments but offered no indication of catastrophic potential. Scientists interpreted the data as evidence of inactivity. They believed they were observing a sleeping giant, never considering the possibility that it was merely silent. Limited visibility further complicated the problem. Many faults in California cut across open desert landscapes where geological evidence remains exposed and easily studied. In contrast, the Tintina Fault lies hidden beneath some of the densest forest terrain in North America. Surface features that would clearly signal danger in open environments remain concealed beneath continuous tree cover. Canada's National Seismic Hazard Model has yet to classify the Tintina Fault as a distinct earthquake source. Authorities have indicated that new research findings will be incorporated at some unspecified time in the future. Administrative processes move slowly, while geological forces operate on entirely different times. One researcher summarized the situation with stark precision. The greatest danger is not merely that the fault is active, but that it has largely escaped attention. The contrast with preparedness efforts in parts of the United States is striking. Along the Pacific coast, tsunami evacuation zones are clearly marked. Communities conduct emergency drills. Building standards are shaped by recognized seismic risks. Public awareness campaigns inform residents about the dangers beneath their region. In Vancouver and surrounding areas, however, many people live within earthquake-prone zones without fully understanding the potential threat. Numerous buildings constructed in the 1970s remain occupied, despite failing to meet modern seismic safety standards.
The Cascadia Fault ruptures with magnitude 9 intensity. That event triggers the San Andreas Fault along its entire length. Stress transfers northward activate the Tintina Fault. 3 catastrophic earthquakes strike in rapid succession across thousands of miles. The Pacific Northwest would be isolated for weeks. Roads destroyed, airports flooded, ports demolished. If California simultaneously faces its own catastrophe, where does help come from? The logistics of responding to cascading disasters across multiple fault systems exceed anything emergency management has ever attempted. These connections transform the Tintina Fault from a regional concern into a continental threat. The faults are linked. Their dangers multiply together. The scientific community is finally responding to what the Tintina Fault has been trying to tell us for millennia. Researchers are pushing for immediate integration of their findings into Canada's National Seismic Hazard Model. The goal is straightforward, but urgent. Formulate plans that can save human lives and protect critical infrastructure before the next rupture arrives. The fundamental understanding of this fault has shifted dramatically in just months. What geologists dismissed as dormant for 40 million years now stands revealed as dangerous and potentially overdue. A century of assumptions collapsed under the weight of new evidence. The question is whether the response will come fast enough. Communities across the impact zone face a preparation gap that borders on negligence. Over 125,000 people in Alaska's Fairbanks North Star Borough have received virtually no information about the threat beneath their feet. Dawson City sits just 12 miles from the most active section of the fault. Residents there have no evacuation plans, no emergency protocols, no understanding of what a magnitude 7.5 or larger earthquake would mean for their homes and families. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline carries oil that fuels economies across the continent. Engineers designed that infrastructure based on seismic assessments that did not account for the Tintina Fault's true potential. If those pipelines rupture during a major earthquake, the environmental and economic consequences would extend far beyond Alaska's borders. The building codes throughout the region reflect outdated hazard models. Structures that seemed adequate under old assumptions may prove catastrophically vulnerable under new understanding. Retrofitting takes time and money. Both are running short. The broader lesson extends beyond a single fault line. The Tintina Fault hid in plain sight for over a century.
Researchers are now urging authorities to immediately incorporate these findings into Canada's National Seismic Hazard Model. Their objective is both simple and urgent: develop strategies capable of protecting lives and safeguarding critical infrastructure before another rupture occurs. In only a matter of months, scientific understanding of this fault has transformed dramatically. What geologists once considered inactive for tens of millions of years is now recognized as a serious and potentially overdue threat. Decades of assumptions have collapsed under the weight of new evidence. The pressing concern is whether action will follow quickly enough. Communities across the projected impact region face a dangerous lack of preparation. More than 125,000 residents in Alaska's Fairbanks North Star Borough remain largely uninformed about the risk beneath them. Dawson City lies just 12 miles from one of the fault's most active segments, yet residents there have no evacuation strategies, no emergency response framework, and little awareness of what a magnitude 7.5 or greater earthquake could mean for their safety and livelihoods. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline transports oil that supports economies far beyond the region. Its design was based on seismic evaluations that underestimated the Tintina Fault's true capacity. A major rupture could severely damage sections of this infrastructure. The resulting environmental and economic consequences would extend far beyond Alaska itself. Building regulations across the region were also developed using outdated hazard assumptions. Structures once considered safe may prove dangerously vulnerable under updated risk assessments. Strengthening infrastructure requires both time and financial resources, and both are limited. The broader implications extend well beyond a single fault system. For more than a century, the Tintina Fault remained hidden in plain sight. Dense forests obscured surface indicators. Rare seismic activity kept it low on monitoring priorities. Sparse historical records concealed its long-term behavior. Every condition that allowed this threat to go unnoticed could be masking other dangers elsewhere. How many additional fault systems remain hidden beneath forests, beneath oceans, or beneath the limitations of incomplete data? The technology that revealed the Tintina Fault is available today. The critical question is whether it will be applied widely and quickly enough to detect the next concealed hazard before it announces itself through destruction. Geological time does not align with human perception. 12,000 years may seem unimaginably long to people who struggled to plan even months ahead. Yet, within the lifespan of a fault system, such a period passes like a single breath held in suspension. Eventually, that breath is released. It always is. The Tintina Fault has continued accumulating strain in silence while generations have lived their lives above it. Indigenous communities traveled this land for thousands of years. Later, settlers arrived and established towns. Cities expanded. Pipelines crossed remote wilderness. All of it unfolded while the fault remained waiting below. The scientific community has delivered its warning. The evidence leaves little room for doubt. Stress continues to build with each passing year. Only one question remains unanswered. A question geology never reveals in advance. When will the Tintina Fault finally break its silence? And when it does, will anyone be prepared?